Pool Hopping, the 15th episode of the 5th season of Steven Universe. And probably the best classic-style Steven Universe episode that we've gotten in a very long time. This episode was an episode in the tradition of earlier Steven Universe episodes, and I think it was more effective at that than early Steven Universe episodes were. Steven is lamenting how different things have become, and in the process of doing so, he discovers to his surprise that the Big Donut is still open because it has got a new employee, and it's not Dewey, like a lot of people suspected. It is, in fact, a Garnet. And it's not because they need money, it's not because she wants to work there, it's because Garnet now strives to be as random as possible. She is actively pursuing being as random as possible. And it's not because she's trying to jumpstart a career on whatever Steven's Universe's version of Vine is. It's because she's trying to fool her future vision, allowing her to see less likely outcomes than she would usually be able to see in a way of learning about and expanding her powers. Which already is one of the most clever concepts this show has ever come up with. Taking an established power, a power like future vision that's so well defined by the narrative, and working within the definition of that power, building an entire story around expanding that definition. That's really cool. She enlists Steven on her quest, of course, because I would argue at this point in her life, Steven is Garnet's favorite person. Of course she'd want to have him along. And they just kind of do stuff. First they order a bunch of pizzas and just take them around town and give them to people, eventually culminating in them ending up at Vidalia's house offering her a pizza, which then escalates to them posing for a painting. But while they're posing for the painting, they see a stray kitten and chase after it, which then escalates to them finding a bunch of stray kittens, which escalates in them rescuing the stray kittens and Garnet adopting one for herself. It's a super simple episode, built of a whole bunch of super simple concepts stacked one atop the other. And while it isn't Steven learning about one of his powers, it's Garnet. Instead, it does recapture the feeling of older style Steven Universe episodes really effectively. The point of the narrative is to teach one of the characters about one of their abilities. It's mostly a comedy episode with mostly disjointed and random things happening, things which don't seem to amount to anything until they finally do at the end. But there's all kinds of little snippets dropped in there which are interesting to lore fans. Like at one point, as they're walking down the street with the last pizza, Garnet mentions that they should stop by Vidalia's because Onion was taken by the homeworld gems. I'm assuming she means Aquamarine and Topaz. Thinking of an alternate universe where Steven didn't do the unforeseen thing and turn himself over to free everyone else. It felt like one of those old school tidbits that used to get dropped into episodes specifically to get people thinking about stuff, though thankfully this one does get resolved in the climax of this particular episode. Because when Garnet finds the cats, even though this entire time she's been trying to stretch the limits of her future vision, finally she is presented with so many possibilities that she just can't see the outcome. It's overwhelming to her and she breaks down and you realize she's kind of having a gem equivalent of an existential crisis. And the resolution ends up being simpler than I think she realized it possibly could be. Probably because she's a gem and she's not used to people changing very quickly. I mean, think about it. Greg was already an adult with a very established personality by the time she met him. Garnet didn't expect Steven to mature as quickly as he has. She realizes in that moment where he's the one to help her with her existential crisis, just how much he's grown and changed. She realizes that she's been looking at futures where he still acts like a child, but he doesn't act like a child anymore, and suddenly her future vision works again, which actually addresses an interesting problem I've had with recent episodes. Why is it that Garnet has had so much trouble foreseeing some of the stuff that's happened? I mean, obviously future vision is flawed. She's not going to pick the right futures to look into every single time flawlessly, and she's still not, but it just seems like she's been striking out far too often lately. I've been wondering if that was on purpose, and based on this episode, it looks like it was. This episode also marks a very clear shift in the character dynamic between her and Steven. The moment that they see the cat, and Garnet clearly wants to go after it, and Steven clearly wants to go after it, Garnet defers to Steven. She tells him that he has to make the choice. Because at the end of the day, whether she realized it yet or not, this entire endeavor was focusing on Steven and his decisions. She knew that she couldn't make the choice that she would make and still get the results that she wanted. But it's interesting because for a long time they've been building Steven up to be sort of Garnet's replacement as leader of the Crystal Gems. It's as I've said before, Garnet just isn't suited to the job. She did all right back when they were sort of in a groove, back when there was a status quo, back when Steven acted like a child and the biggest threat was the monster of the week. Back then, her future vision worked almost 100% of the time. And she was an effective leader for that reason. She could see what was going to happen, knew how to react, and she knew what to tell other people to do to make it out alive. Lately, with her future vision not as reliable, that stopped being the case, and Garnet, who doesn't actually have any real leadership skills, has been floundering. Now that she's kind of got the handle on her future vision again, she can probably remain an effective leader for a while longer, but eventually someone with actual leadership skills is going to have to step up, and that's got to be Steven. He's the only one on the team who has any, except maybe for Connie. But even Connie tends to defer to his judgment more often than not. I know I've been harping a lot on Rose lately, and it kind of feels underhanded to do so again, even in an indirect way, but I've got to say, I'm getting more and more the impression as time goes on that Rose just kind of used Garnet as a sapphire who could punch things. Like, she even flat out says, and I think it was We Need to Talk, that if you need to know the future, go talk to Garnet. That's what she's there for. And I know that's a horrible thing to say because Rose was the liberator of gems and whatnot, but it really does sound like she was just using Garnet for one purpose. She assigned Garnet with a purpose, just like the diamonds might have. And so Garnet's kind of been left with the impression that without her future vision, she doesn't have a purpose. And that's horrible. The entire point of the rebellion was to make a world where gems didn't have to feel that way. I guess the point I'm trying to get across is this was an excellent episode with multiple layers to unpack. It said a lot without actually saying a lot, which is fundamentally why I fell in love with the show, its ability to do just that. There was no big, long, drawn-out exposition scene, just a couple of meaningful interactions between two great characters. Interactions which were simplistic and yet said more than they actually literally said. And on top of it, it was smattered with tons of cuteness, great comedy, fantastic animation, great voice work. I felt for a while like the quality of the show was kind of on the decline. This episode and the other episodes that were aired around it has led me to start to reverse that opinion. I feel like the show lost its groove for a while, but I feel like it's finding it again, and then some. And I couldn't be more happy about that. Pool Hopping is an excellent episode which aired alongside two other excellent episodes and one very good episode. I honestly kind of get the feeling that this episode down the line is going to be the defining Garnet character episode after Jailbreak. I think that's pretty cool. But as per usual, guys, I'd like to know, what did you think of this episode? If you have seen it, let's get discussion going in the comment section down below or over on my Discord. Link in the description. Either way, though, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.